Hi, this is the Antidisestablishmentarian podcast, episode 7, I believe. Today is April 14th, 2025. And I guess I wanted to touch upon a few quick developments. The first major development is that Trump is now basically not going to be asking El Salvador to give back Garcia, the immigrant who was sent back to El Salvador in defiance of the judge's order not to send them back to El Salvador. Now, to be fair, he is a citizen of El Salvador, but that's not what gets me about this case. Today, I think Bukele, the El Salvadorian president, basically said, no, we're not going to send them back in the press conference, I believe, at the White House with Trump. And he basically said, no, we would never do that. We would never send one of our own, quote unquote, terrorists to the United States. We wouldn't smuggle them in. The reason why this case gets me is for two reasons. The first is it is so obvious what happened. There's no way the El Salvadorian president would be saying no if the United States asked him to send back Garcia, especially considering the fact that the United States is paying him for the migrants that America is sending over under the, at least in part, the Alien Enemies Act. And so it seems very obvious. In fact, it is very clear. It can't really be any other way that the president of El Salvador basically was told by the Trump administration to refuse to send back Garcia, despite the fact that the Supreme Court of the United States, in a unanimous decision, told the Trump administration that you need to facilitate, that was the word they used, facilitate the return of Garcia. And the Trump administration basically said, you know what? We can get the El Salvadoran president to say no. And if he says no, there's nothing we can do. But it's very obvious to everybody that if they just asked him, he would have been fine sending Garcia back to the United States. So the first concern is that the Trump administration is deliberately undermining the Supreme Court. It is doing it in such an obvious and plain way that they're gaslighting everybody. Everybody with two brain cells knows that they told, in one way or another, the president of El Salvador to publicly refuse to send Garcia back, so they would have some cover. And as soon as he did that, now they're just laughing. They're laughing at our judicial system. It is literally Andrew Jackson's Supreme Court. You've made your decision, now enforce it. You made your decision to bring Garcia back. Now do it yourself. What were the Supreme Court justices, the conservative ones, like Thomas, whose wife was into all the conspiracy theories about bamboo ballots, or the other people, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Alito. Remember Alito, your wife, putting those upside down American flags under the Biden administration because America was in trouble when Biden won? What do you think now, when he is openly in defiance of the Supreme Court? He wouldn't even answer the question today. Somebody asked him, like, oh, would you follow the Supreme Court? A few weeks ago, he said, yes, I would not disobey the Supreme Court. Now he just ignores the question. because he is defying the Supreme Court. We're this close to him openly just saying no to the Supreme Court. He did everything but that in this case. He basically just said, you know what? You can't force me. We'll tell Bukele to refuse, and there's nothing you can do. And everybody knows that you told them. Because there's no way he would go along with it otherwise. Is he going to risk the relationship with the United States over a citizen that he doesn't care about? That's rotting in his jail without due process now because of some tattoos while his family's crying? And so, what am I supposed to do? Just sit here? I mean, I've been starting to go to protests. I'm doing this, doing a few other things. But something needs to be done. People need to go out and protest. It's 5 minutes before midnight. And you know what pisses me off? You got a lot of people on the right who know better. Yeah, Mark Levin, Ben Shapiro. I don't know what Ben is going to say about this yet. Markle's already come out and said in not so many words, these rogue district judges, and this is the Supreme Court, that's got a conservative majority with a 9-3 or a 6-3. And like I told you, on a social media post, like I told you, today it's Garcia because he had maybe the wrong tattoo. And they even admitted they made a mistake in sending him to El Salvador. The Trump administration admitted it was a mistake. They just didn't want to get him back. Why? Which brings me to my second point. Why? Why wouldn't you, if you sent a person who shouldn't have been sent there, why wouldn't you want to get him back? Just make an effort. It's common decency that if you send somebody to a foreign prison with God knows what kinds of conditions, if you made a mistake, if you said you made a mistake, bring him back. But no, they don't want to look weak. They got careers to build. Bondi has got career to build on the suffering of somebody else, the suffering of his children, his wife. Oh, but he shouldn't have been in the United States anyway. Oh, but he was MS-13. There's no evidence. Last time you arrested an MS-13 leader, what did you do? You're trying to drop the case right now against him. You had this whole PR stunt where you came out and said, we got one of the top guys of MS-13. Anything MS-13 did, this guy, I'm paraphrasing what you said, and this is what you said, is responsible for it. And now you're dropping the case because you don't have the evidence, and you're just trying to deport him. And the MS-13 alleged person, who probably at this point isn't even MS-13, at the very least you don't have the evidence for it, is now arguing, no, don't drop the case. Try me. If you think I did these things, try me. Because I don't want to go to a foreign prison and rot without due process for God knows how long. It's a circus. A goddamn circus. But as I was saying, today it's Garcia. Maybe he had the wrong tattoo. Tomorrow is going to be somebody else. Maybe a pro-Israeli protester with the Star of David as his tattoo. And the next administration will pick him up because that is what happens when you open the door to sending people without due process to foreign prisons. And today, I believe Trump said that he might even do that to citizens. Oh, but no, he's just joking, right, Ben? He's just joking. We're gonna laugh this one off. Ha ha. A man is rotting in a foreign prison. The SCOTUS said unanimously bring him back. Trump basically says, ha ha, uh, we we won't, or we'll pretend like we can't. And now we just laugh it off. Of course, the problem is not enough people care. The Trump approval poll is now -5, 45, 50, or something like that. 45 approve, 50 disapprove. I mean, how? How is that? How is that the approval rating if we're doing this? Which brings me to another thing I wanted to mention. Bill Maher. Bill Maher went to have dinner with Trump. Not thought a lot about that. Got mixed feelings about it, but I think it's really emblematic about what's going on. He says you got to talk to the other side. You got to talk to the other side. Bill, wasn't it you just a few weeks ago that called them Hitler-lite? Now, look, it seems to me you wouldn't go to dinner with Hitler. And I'm not saying Trump is Hitler. But if you think he is, or he is Hitler-lite, would you go to dinner with somebody who is Hitler-lite? What does that even mean, Hitler-lite? He's got some tendencies, an inclination to do things that Hitler would do. Is that what Hitler-lite is? And so you go to dinner with him. And I don't blame you for, once you went to dinner, to saying how it really was. I believe the truth is sacred. You should always tell the truth. Always. So if you said he was measured, I believe the word was used, down to earth, then, once you went there, then you had to explain what happened. But as your guest, before you decided to interrupt him, was trying to tell you, and rightfully so, is that he used you like a prop. He used you like a prop, like a PR prop. He laughed at your jokes, Bill. He knew from the very beginning that he was going to come across as totally different. And you bought it. You swallowed it, hook, line, and sinker. Oh, Trump is different. He's not the crazy person he is in public. Trump, I believe, to some extent, is a sociopath. Maybe not clinically, but he's definitely a narcissist. And yes, I've heard reports of him being charming in person, but he still only cares about himself. There's overwhelming evidence that he only cares about himself. I can go through a litany of things that he's done that makes it 100%, in my opinion, that he only cares about himself, not the Republican Party, because he was willing to rip it up if he wasn't the candidate. Remember that? How he won't endorse the winner of the primary. I mean, he did that in 2016. He did that in 2024, I believe. I mean, he only says he would if he thinks he'll win. But if there's any doubt, he pulls back on that. He doesn't care about conservatism. He basically handed the Labour Party in Canada a win by calling him the 51st state. He regularly attacks his opponents, regardless of whether they're in purple districts or not. But I mean, we all know that. So we're not going to go into Trump only caring about himself. The question is now, Bill, did your visit do more harm than good? On one hand, if you were able to speak to him about some topics, like the Iran deal that he had trashed, some of the other topics. Well, maybe, considering that he is the president and there are legitimate questions about where he's getting his information and whether he's just surrounded by yes men, well, then maybe it was good to hear an outside voice and an outside opinion on a lot of the issues. So that is the only way, in my opinion, you can justify that. But that's the way you justify that. Let me just be clear. It is not because, oh, we need to talk to the other side. Again, if you're going to call him Hitler-lite and a monster and somebody who is on the brink of destroying American democracy, you don't need to talk to him. You don't need to go out to dinner to him. You don't need to make jokes with him, laugh with him, get a tour of the White House with him. No, you can, but then either you're willing to have dinner with, like you said, Hitler-lite, or he's not Hitler-lite. But you can't have it both ways. Unless your argument is that, yes, he is Hitler-lite, but he is the president. He is got more power than any president in history. Serious concerns about him not getting accurate information. And here's my chance to tell him, what's actually happening. And if that helps avoid some worst case scenarios, then that is a legitimate reason. But you got to say that. You got to believe that that's why you did it. Otherwise, I don't know how you can have it both ways. Which brings me to my last point for today, I think. I think there's this battle almost going on between very different philosophies of how to govern the United States. On one hand, you have somebody like Trump who operates almost purely by instinct. And then you have the Biden way, the Obama way, really most past presidents, where they're a lot more methodical and deliberate. Which way is the better way to go is currently playing out. And I don't know who's going to win. And to be fair, what I'll call the Trump-Elon approach works sometimes. It works actually in business. And I'll explain why. So, in business, the biggest and most important attributes, I would say, are the ability to take initiative and taking risk. So, you can see that in a lot of business leaders. Elon took a huge amount of risk, Tesla with SpaceX. And you could even argue with the 2024 election, for better or for worse. And when it pays off big. When it doesn't, it doesn't. But that's the nature of growing your business aggressively. So, when Trump operates instinctually, it's because in the business world, quite frankly, it can work. Doesn't mean it works all the time. He has not been successful with airlines, I think, with casinos, with a football team, stakes, all kinds of things. But that's okay. From a business perspective, you try your luck, you go all in, you do it fast, and you see what sticks, and then you double down on it. That's a very common way for businessmen to grow their businesses aggressively. And ironically, a lot of the stuff that didn't work, and this is what I think some of the wiser business people will perhaps say, is were out of his core competencies. He had really no business in starting football teams. He grew up as a real estate developer. His father was a real estate developer, so he knew the real estate business well. And when he went big on that, he won. There were times where it looked like he was going to lose a lot. There was a property bubble bust, I believe, in the 90s or something. But he was able to survive it. And then when the property prices went back up again, his risk paid off. Now, the other approach, just so that we have the other approach, is in some ways more boring, but it's the Biden approach where you have people around you that are experts and they're from think tanks, a lot of papers. You sit down, things take longer, you reach a decision. It's usually going to be a pretty modest or um, thought out decision. And there's going to be a lot of technicalities. And that's how you move the ball forward, 1 inch at a time, essentially. Now, this, like I said, a lot of people are like, well, the Trump and Elon way is the way to go. And you see Elon doing it with Doge. He goes in hard from the very beginning, aggressively cutting. And then things, he cuts the wrong people, reinstate them, keep moving, don't lose momentum. And it's the only way to do it, he believes, in the business world. Because if you go in and try to do think tanks and committees, you get bogged down, and before you know it, you lose momentum and things don't go anywhere. So in the business world, I can understand that. Very different in the government, though. And Trump is the same. That's why he announced a bunch of tariffs, and then that's why he pulled back. Then he's putting on tariffs, putting off tariffs, because in the business world, in some ways, you're always trying to make a deal, seeing what works, what doesn't. What works, you double down on. What doesn't, you scrap. Except we're finding out the drawbacks of such an approach. I mean, it's exciting. It looks like the president is being decisive, proactive, but it's different. It's different. And it's different because when you are running a government and you're making decisions that impact millions, if not billions of people, like tariffs, you got to get it right. Otherwise, people suffer. It's not a business deal. You're not buying a property. And if it falls through, it falls through. That's number one. Number two, on the international stage, people look for consistency. There are such things as moral leadership. There are such things as making sure that you are representing values like freedom, democracy, even if imperfectly. Those things, when you're making a real estate deal or when you're trying to buy Twitter, they really don't play into it. But on an international stage, it does. And so what you're seeing now is, even if Trump goes ahead with the 10% tariffs, which again I think are the minimum that he'll do, already people are unsure. For the next 90 days, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty. Markets don't like uncertainty. But more importantly, when he sees international relations like a business transaction, and he doesn't take into account what kind of damage the United States reputation takes when we side with the aggressor instead of the victim in an invasion, for example, like he did again today, by the way. He blamed Ukraine for starting the war. I'll touch upon that now, actually. I hate it when people don't use the right terminology. Anytime somebody says, we need to stop it. We need to stop it. A lot of people are dying. We need to stop it. Ask them, stop what? Stop what? The war. No, that's not the most precise term. The invasion. Stop the invasion, right? And if they say, yeah, well, sure, war, invasion, the word is invasion. Because how do you stop an invasion? Oh, you stop the aggressor, and then the invasion is stopped. So words matter. So don't get caught up in this. We need to stop the war. You need to stop the invasion. And the only way to stop invasions is to stop the aggressor. It is not to stop the victim from defending themselves. It is to stop the aggressor. So stop calling it a war. It is an invasion. Anybody who wants to help Ukraine and help the United States be on the right side of history, use the word invasion, not war. All right. Now, with that being said, let's get back to what I was saying. And so, right now, like I said, the United States is going to take a lot of damage, but I think what we're going to find out is that boring policy is good policy, or at least better policy. What I worry about, though, is on the left, and I've mentioned this before, you see AOC and Bernie having fairly big rallies. And if the answer to Trump is populism from the left, that's going to be a loss for the United States. We need a party that's not a populist party. We'll see where that goes. But for now, we're seeing, I think, in real time is that you can't have the leader be somebody who just shoots and asks questions later, goes as fast as he can, tries things without thinking them through, because all of those have real world implications. And so I think we all need to do something. We all need to do something to resist this period, this very uncertain period in American history, in my opinion. There are a lot of different ways this can go. Trump runs out of steam, puts on some tariffs, but he doesn't put on the biggest ones. It'll do damage to the economy, might cause a mild recession, but maybe that's where it ends. Gives up on trying to invade Greenland. And he just kind of goes back to doing what he usually does, which is rage watching Bill Maher, apparently, or whoever it is now. Last time it was Don Lemon. Or Trump continues down the path that he started in the second term. And he does crazy, crazy things. Continues with his ill-conceived tariff policy, causing a more serious recession. And to deflect, or just because he believes in expansionism now, so much for isolationism. Decides to take over Greenland, potentially triggering a war with the rest of the EU. Decides to continue to silence and attack his critics. I don't know why the law firms are rolling over it as one of the most shameful things I've seen. But journalists, everybody's got to stick together. The law firms need to stick together, but they won't. The journalists should have stuck by AP when it got banned, but they didn't. And so, I know at the end of the day, a lot of people probably want the approval ratings to drop. They can't wait for the midterms. Democrats hopefully will win. And then there's going to be at least some resistance in one of the branches, but don't bet on it. I think Trump doesn't fall below 36 or 37%, even after J6. He was around 35%. He's got a floor where a third of the country will support him no matter what. Now, yeah, he'll start losing people on the right if he hits that low of an approval rating, but there's no guarantee that he will. Populism is one heck of a drug. I keep saying it. His really simple, overly simplistic solutions hit home to people who don't follow politics and don't know any better. So when he's saying he's sending away terrorists and gang members. A lot of people don't know the danger of doing that without or with very limited due process under statutes that have been around for hundreds of years but have only been used during wartime. I mean, some of this stuff is just insane, but people it takes time for people to understand that, and this is where Trump comes in. The one thing I'll say is that a certain part of the population, they knew, I think, subconsciously who Trump was and what he was all about. They knew he was a fighter. And somehow, based on the way he spoke, he knew he would try to upend the establishment. Now, one of the big problems I have with that part of the population who feels like they've fallen behind is objectively, it is not true. Now, we've talked about this on the left. I've talked about it on the left with racism when people were like, yeah, America is so racist. It's as racist as ever. No, objectively speaking, it is not by any objective metric. America is less racist nowadays than it was, 90s, 80s, 70s, or before. And, we focused on the facts, and the people were like, yeah, the facts don't support that we're more racist. Yeah. But the facts also don't support that the average American is worse off today than they were in the past. They just don't. The average American is wealthier today than they were in the past. Now, you could argue income inequality is what's driving that frustration where they see people getting richer and richer and they feel like they're falling behind relative to them. And that might be a psychological issue. And, there are ways to resolve that or to just say it is the way that it is. But objectively speaking, you're not worse off. You are not worse off. The average American is not worse off. You don't need to bring the manufacturing back because you are not worse off. You're better off without the manufacturing jobs. You make more than you've ever made. The average American does. So why are we pretending? I hate this. I hate the fact when we just take the wrong assumptions from the right, if you will, and just accept them as being true. Because if you say that the average American is worse off today, then you're giving Trump a pass. In that case, you're excusing what he's doing. Implicitly, you're saying, okay, well, then we need to try tariffs. Free trade didn't work. No, free trade worked. The average American, ask any AI system. I did it today before doing this. By any objective metric, the average American is wealthier today than they were at any point in time historically. So the free trade, globalization, all of that worked. All of that worked. And now we're going backwards. And now we're going to take a step back. Now we might not be because of the tariffs. That's how you argue that. Not the way I keep seeing the left try to argue the tariff situation, or even the centrists, by conceding this idea that we're worse off today than we were back then. Oh, globalization, not everybody was able to make the most of it. That's what I keep hearing. That's like a lighter version of people are worse off today than they were back then. That's true with any revolution. That's true with the Industrial Revolution. That was true with the Agricultural Revolution. Of course, some people will benefit more. Some people will benefit less. Can we do things to help the people who benefit less? Maybe. Quite frankly, I don't think the government should necessarily be all that involved in that. I think that ultimately, that's just, in some cases, what life is. It's always been the case that with change, some people might benefit more, some might benefit less. It is the way things are. The way you help people is personally, individually. These are things that Republicans used to believe in. The church, for example, can help. Nonprofits can help. Individuals can help people learn new skills. The government, really bad at trying to help people learn and retrain. I don't think I've seen actually that much evidence to see that it works. But bringing manufacturing back, that ain't going to help either. You're going to hurt more people than you help with that. It's not impossible. But I just want to make sure that people understand we are better off today than we were back then. Just to prove that the average American's better off today than they were back then, I'm just going to go through a list of criteria because I feel like this is an important point, and it's important that people understand how to argue against tariffs. People are better off today because of free trade and globalism. And I think conceding the point that people have been left behind by globalization and automation and globalism, I think is a very, very dangerous and ill conceived way to go on this because then you will lose that argument. Instead, stick by your guns and stick by globalism, free trade. We are better off today than we were back then by almost any metric. Let's go through the metrics right now. First, income and wealth. Real GDP per capita in the US has grown significantly over time. In 2023, this was apparently, I'm using, by the way, Grok, just in case anybody has a preference for Grok. Let's use Elon's AI for this. It was about 81,000 compared to $39,000 in 1970 and 15,000 in 1929. Median household income in 2023 was roughly 81,000, higher than in prior decades when adjusted for inflation. So there it is. Even when adjusted for inflation, the median household income is higher today. It is higher than it is anywhere almost in the world with a population of like over at least a couple of million. I mean, the United States really is far and above the economic powerhouse. Purchasing power. The average American has increased to more goods and services than ever. A 2023 basket of consumer goods costs less in hours worked than in 1990 or 1950. So stop selling us this BS that we are worse off today than we were back then. Employment. I mean, the unemployment rate is still very low. So I don't think that's something that can be argued. Life expectancy. Life expectancy at birth is 79 years. It was 70 in 1960, 59 in 1930. So if you're wondering why the healthcare costs have been rising up, it's because we're living longer. And it's hard to, as you get older, you get more issues. And you need healthcare to resolve those issues. So it's going to get more expensive. What else is there? I mean, technologically wise, we're better off. Environmentally, we're better off. Air and water quality are better. I mean, like I said, it's hard to argue that we are worse off by almost any metric. So I'll end it on that note. Free trade, globalization, those shouldn't be dirty words. These are the things that have done more than anything else to reduce poverty around the world and to help America. And we are going backwards on that. It is so disappointing and frustrating to see. And I'm worried that this is just a direction the United States is taking. It's going to take us a long time before we get back on track. And why? Because people feel that they've been left behind. But just like I talked about with other issues, your feelings are not necessarily accurate. You might be comparing yourself to somebody. You need to look at the facts. All right.